What if the greatest danger to your life isn't failure, but comfort, not chaos, not tragedy, not even fear? Just the soft hum of okay, the gentle routine of getting by, the quiet erosion of fire. Because here's the truth, most lives don't crash, they fade. Not because we aren't capable, but because we settle. We sleepwalk through days that could have been defining. We call survival a life, and deep down, something in us starts to rot from lack of use. But you didn't come here to rot. You came here to remember. And today, we're going to do exactly that. The weight of average, let's call it what it is, mediocrity. Not a curse, not an insult, but a condition, a subtle drift into default. You're not drowning, but you're not moving forward either. You're floating. And floating, over time, becomes forgetting what you once burned for. You feel it in the in-between moments, the quiet sigh after work, the glazed-over glance at your phone, that low-grade hum of "is this it?" This isn't laziness. It's not weakness. It's the cost of living without design, without depth, without direction. And here's the hard truth. Mediocrity isn't some external force holding you down. It's the absence of force from within, but you're not powerless. In fact, you've never been more equipped, because two of the sharpest minds in history left you clues. Not in the form of slogans, but in the form of questions that demand a real response. Nietzsche and Kant, the wild rebel and the rigorous moralist. One says, burn the script. The other says, build the backbone, and strangely, they don't contradict. They complete. Nietzsche asks, who are you, outside the rules? Kant asks, who are you, despite the noise? Nietzsche gives you the will, the raw defiance to not just exist, but create. He believed that when meaning collapses, you don't wait for a new one, you forge it. His God is dead wasn't celebration, it was a call. If the old anchors are gone, then you must become the anchor. But raw will is dangerous without direction. That's where Kant enters. Kant didn't care how you felt. He cared how you acted. He gave you the compass. Live by principles that you'd want everyone else to follow. Not to impress, but to respect yourself, to become someone whose word matters even in the dark. So here's the synthesis. Nietzsche sets your soul on fire. Kant keeps it from burning the house down. Together, they don't give you a map. They give you the two things mediocrity can't survive, meaning and morality. Drive and discipline, vision and values. And that's what this journey is about. Over the next few parts, we'll break open the cage you didn't know you were living in. We'll dive into the psychology that keeps you small. We'll translate bold philosophy into practical actions. And we'll build a strategy not for success, but for sovereignty. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming clear. Because the version of you that's clear about your standards, your mission, your worth is unstoppable. And when you live like that, mediocrity isn't an enemy. It's just a memory. So, ask yourself, am I living on purpose or on autopilot? If you flinch at the answer, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Reclaiming meaning in a world that forgot how. Let me ask you something that no one ever really prepares us for. What do you do when life is technically fine, but feels hollow? You're not in crisis. You're just numb? The same tasks, same goals, same shallow highs. Everyone says you should be happy, but deep down, you feel like a passenger in your own story. Like you were built for more, but no one gave you a map. This is where mediocrity thrives, in the quiet, in the routine, in the normalization of a life unlived. And this right here is where philosophy becomes a survival skill. Let's start with Nietzsche. People love quoting him without understanding him. But Nietzsche wasn't trying to shock or destroy. He was trying to wake you up. When he said, God is dead, he wasn't mocking religion. He was mourning meaning. In a world that once relied on external truths, God, kings, tradition, those pillars had started to crumble, and in their place, emptiness. He saw what was coming, a generation left to drift in a world without fixed values, told they could be anything yet believing in nothing. Sound familiar? That's our world. Endless options. Infinite scrolling, but no direction, no gravity. Nietzsche wasn't celebrating the chaos. He was warning us. Because when no one tells you what matters, you have to figure it out yourself. Or risk becoming just another face in the herd. That's where his concept of the Bermensch, the overman, comes in. No, it's not a superhero. It's not arrogance. It's responsibility. The overman is someone who creates their own values and lives by them. Someone who doesn't ask, what should I do? But rather, what must I do if I am to honor the deepest truth in me? But Nietzsche also knew most people won't choose this path because it's hard, it requires honesty, and it often means standing alone. That's why, he said, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. He wasn't being poetic, he was being literal. The tribe, the crowd, wants you to be predictable, safe, harmless. They don't want you to question your 9 to 5. They don't want you to challenge social scripts. They want you to follow the rules and smile while doing it. But the moment you ask, is this all there is? You threaten the system, and the system always pushes back. Now, if Nietzsche is the spark, then Immanuel Kant is the steel that sharpens it. Kant is the voice that says, fine, you've decided to live with purpose. But on what terms? He knew freedom without structure is chaos. That desire, if left unchecked, becomes self-destruction. So he offered something different, duty. But not duty in the military sense, not guilt, not people-pleasing. Real duty, ethical responsibility, doing what's right not because it's easy or popular, but because it's right. Kant's test, ask yourself this, what if everyone lived the way I do? Would the world improve or collapse? That's the core of his categorical imperative. It's a moral mirror. You don't get to hide behind, well, nobody else is doing it. You don't get to excuse laziness or shortcuts. You are responsible, not just for your results, but for your impact. Kant believed that humans have dignity not because of talent or wealth, but because we're capable of moral reasoning. We can choose. We can stand for something. And in doing so, we honor our humanity. So what happens when you combine Nietzsche's fire with Kant's structure? You get something powerful. You get a philosophy of becoming. Nietzsche says, become who you are. Don't wait for permission. Don't outsource your values. Live as a creator. Kant says, but ground that life in principles. Live in such a way that your actions elevate not just yourself, but the world around you. Together, they tell you, stop coasting, start building. You see, mediocrity isn't just about doing less. It's about living without intention. About taking the path of least resistance, not because it's right, but because it's easy. It's the subtle death of meaning, one compromise at a time, but there's a way out. It starts with this simple, brutal truth. You are responsible for the meaning in your life. Not your parents, not society, not some job description or horoscope or algorithm. You. And here's the twist. That's not a burden. That's your liberation. It means you get to choose. You get to build. You get to say, this is what I stand for. This is how I will live. And this is who I will become even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, because every time you say no to mediocrity, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Every time you act not out of habit, but out of principle, you evolve. Every time you move closer to that version of you that lives with fire and focus, you become the kind of person who doesn't just survive, but shapes reality. This isn't self-help fluff. This is the raw, ancient call of philosophy. Know thyself, choose thyself, forge thyself. That's what Nietzsche and Kant are inviting you into. Not a classroom, a battlefield, a journey. A rebellion against the smallness of good enough, and you don't need to be a philosopher to begin. You just need to stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what's worth doing, even if I fail? Because when you find that answer, you'll have already stepped out of mediocrity and into something real. Now, take a moment, sit with that question. What is worth doing even if you fail? Not for money, not for applause, not for your resume, but for the soul. That question is where everything begins. Why we stay stuck and how to break free. Let's get real. Most people don't choose mediocrity consciously. No one wakes up and says, I want to be average, but somehow they end up there. They settle, they shrink. They give away little pieces of themselves in exchange for approval, comfort, or safety. Why? Because mediocrity isn't a lack of ambition, it's the byproduct of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of stepping out of line. But here's the trick mediocrity plays on you. It dresses up as being reasonable. It whispers, don't aim too high. Don't stand out. Don't rock the boat. And that voice isn't random. It's ancient. It's evolutionary. Your brain is wired for survival, not greatness. It doesn't care if you're fulfilled, it just wants you safe, predictable, quiet. And that, right there, is the trap. So, if you've ever felt stuck, even though you know you're capable of more, you're not broken, you're normal. But if you want an extraordinary life, you have to do something deeply abnormal. You have to unlearn comfort. Let's start by understanding the psychology behind this. One of the most influential ideas in modern psychology is the concept of fixed mindset versus growth mindset, coined by Carol Dweck. People with a fixed mindset believe their abilities are static. You're either good at something or you're not. So what happens? They avoid challenges. They fear effort. They interpret failure as identity. If I failed, I must not be good enough. Sound familiar? That mindset feeds mediocrity like gasoline feeds fire. On the other hand, a growth mindset says abilities can be developed. Effort is essential. Failure is feedback, not. Here's the problem. Most of us were raised in systems that reward the appearance of success, not the pursuit of excellence. We were praised for getting A's, not for asking hard questions. We were rewarded for fitting in, not standing out. And so, little by little, we learn. Don't risk being wrong. Don't look foolish. Don't fail. We're trained to please, not to grow, but growth is messy. It requires discomfort, rejection, long stretches of not knowing, and our egos hate that. So instead of evolving, we plateau. We choose the safe job over the meaningful one. We stay in relationships that don't challenge us just because they're stable. We scroll through highlight reels instead of writing our own story. And all of it feels normal until one day it doesn't. Until one day you wake up and realize you've built a life that looks fine from the outside but feels like slow death on the inside. So what do? This is where Nietzsche returns. He understood this tension. He saw how culture breeds conformity, how the herd punishes authenticity, how people trade their freedom for belonging. He called it slave morality, not in the literal sense, but in the psychological one. It's the mindset of resentment, of bitterness, of secretly envying those who dare to live boldly while justifying your own caution as virtue. He warned us, the surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Translation: if you reward sameness, you kill greatness. And so Nietzsche's challenge wasn't just philosophical, it was personal. He demanded that you look inward and ask, whose life am I living? Are your goals truly yours? Are your values self-chosen or just inherited? And if you had to start from scratch, what would you still keep? These are hard questions, but necessary ones. Because transformation doesn't start with answers, it starts with brutal honesty. Now let's bring Kant into the conversation. Where Nietzsche asks you to rebel, Kant asks you to refine. He's not interested in impulse, he's interested in integrity. He believed that true freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's having the discipline to do what's right, even when it's inconvenient. This is where most modern self-help falls flat. It tells you to follow your passion, but doesn't teach you how to endure the grind. It romanticizes purpose, but forgets that purpose requires structure. That's what Kant offers, moral scaffolding. He gives your fire a shape. He says, live by principles you respect even when no one's watching. This is where Nietzsche and Kant converge. Nietzsche gives you the courage to break the script. Kant gives you the clarity to write a better one. Together, they offer an antidote to mediocrity that goes beyond hype. They tell you, yes, you should create your own path. But do it with discipline. Yes, live by your values. But make sure those values hold up under pressure. And most of all, yes, dare to become something more. But don't chase intensity, chase integrity. So how does this actually show up in real life? Let's look at some examples not as icons, but as mirrors. First, the artist no one understood, Vincent van Gogh. He sold only one painting in his lifetime. He was called mad, misunderstood, mocked, but he kept painting, not for fame, not for fortune, but because he had to. That was his calling. Nietzsche would call that authenticity, living in accordance with your inner truth. Kant would call it duty to one's craft, one's conscience, one's internal code. Second, a modern disruptor, Sarah Blakely. She didn't follow the rule book. She didn't even have one. She created Spanx from a place of both vision and grit. Everyone laughed. Now she's a billionaire who did it her way. Nietzsche would say she forged her own values. Kant would say she built something that served real people. That's alignment. And third, fiction but powerful nonetheless, Andy Dufresne in The Shawshank Redemption. Wrongly imprisoned, surrounded by despair. Every reason to give up, but he didn't. He quietly, methodically, tunneled to freedom over 19 years. That's Nietzschean will, that's Kantian resolve, and that right there is the truth. You don't overcome mediocrity in a single moment of inspiration. You do it in the quiet decisions. The invisible hours, the mornings you show up, the nights you say no too easy. It's not one leap, it's 1,000 steps. So here's the uncomfortable invitation. Audit your life. Where are you choosing comfort over growth? Where have you stopped dreaming because it's easier to stay numb? And most importantly, where have you betrayed your own potential just to be liked? These aren't just personal questions, they're existential ones. Because every time you choose mediocrity, a little part of your future dies quietly. But every time you say no more, every time you act not from fear, but from clarity, you start to remember who you really are. You start to build a life that doesn't just function but burns. So, stop waiting. Excellence doesn't arrive. It's built. Purpose doesn't call. It's forged. And the version of you you're looking for, they're not out there. They're buried inside you, waiting for you to show up. 5 tools to break free. Let's stop circling the idea. You don't rise above mediocrity through motivation. You do it through method. Because clarity without execution is just mental decoration. So let's get tactical. Let us turn Nietzsche and Kant into fuel for action, into 5 powerful tools that you can use starting today. Not next month, not someday, today. Tool 1. The North Star Protocol. Nietzsche-inspired clarity. This one is non-negotiable. If you don't define your direction, you'll drift toward distraction. Nietzsche taught us that when traditional sources of meaning collapse, we must create our own. But that doesn't mean waiting for lightning to strike. It means sitting down, alone, and writing a manifesto. Here's the challenge. Spend 30 uninterrupted minutes answering one question. What would I do if I weren't afraid of failing? No filters, no audience, just you and the truth. The point isn't to write a perfect purpose statement. It's to force yourself into confrontation with your real ambitions, the ones you bury under busyness and excuses. Call this your North Star. not because it gives you a path, but because it gives you a direction. Tape it on your wall, screenshot it to your phone. Revisit it every week? Because in moments of doubt, you don't need inspiration, you need orientation. Tool 2. The duty contract Kantian integrity. Now we anchor the fire. Nietzsche gives you vision, but vision without discipline is just fantasy. That's where Kant steps in. This tool is brutally simple. Write a one-page contract with yourself, not a to-do list, a duty list. Pick 3 principles you want to live by, standards that make you respect yourself. Examples: I will speak with honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. I will not delay work out of fear of imperfection. I will treat others as ends, not as means. These aren't goals, they're non-negotiables. Sign the paper, read it every morning. If it feels too rigid, good, that's the point. The world is full of people chasing intensity. But integrity is what keeps you from collapsing when the highs fade. Tool 3. Micro-action habits stacking strategic execution. Big goals die in the fog of motivation. The solution: attach action to routine. It's called habit stacking, one of the most powerful behavior-shaping tools in psychology. And it's where Nietzsche's call for personal creation meets Kant's consistency. Here's how it works. Step 1. Identify something you already do daily: brushing your teeth, making coffee, checking your phone. Step 2. Stack a micro-action onto it. Example: after brushing your teeth, write 100 words of your novel. After making coffee, review your North Star. After closing your laptop, spend 5 minutes planning tomorrow. These actions must be small, ridiculously small. That's how they bypass resistance. This is not sexy, but it works. Because excellence isn't built in grand moments, it's built in what you repeat. Tool 4. The 5% rule. Momentum builder. Forget perfection. You need progress. This rule is savage in its simplicity. Improve by just 5% each week in one area of your life. Not 50%, not overnight transformation. Just 5%, learning to code. Spend 5% more time on practice, building a YouTube channel. Improve your thumbnail click rate by 5%. Want to lead better? Improve one conversation per week. This taps into Nietzsche's core idea: become who you are not through reinvention, but through refinement. And it honors Kant's idea of duty, because even 5% improvement demands you show up. Here's the secret. Over time, 5% becomes exponential. You stop asking, "Can I be the best?" and start asking, "Can I be better than I was?" That's where greatness lives. Tool 5. Influence audit. Environmental mastery. Let's talk about inputs. Your mind is not a fortress, it's a sponge. What you consume, who you talk to, the content you scroll, it shapes you whether you like it or not. Nietzsche would say, if you want to become something rare, stop bathing in the ordinary. Kant would say, be responsible not just for your actions, but for what influences them. So do an audit. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? What kind of content dominates your feed? Are your conversations centered around growth or gossip? Cut what weakens you. Add what sharpens you. Follow thinkers, not influencers. Join spaces where challenge is welcome. Have one friend who calls you out, not just cheers you on. Because the crowd will always pull you back to average. Your job: walk uphill. Let's pause. These tools aren't just productivity hacks. They're psychological weapons, philosophical rituals. They force you to ask better questions, make stronger choices, and become harder to break. But they won't work if you dabble. They only work when you commit. Because overcoming mediocrity isn't a tweak. It's a revolt. You're not optimizing. You're evolving. And evolution doesn't happen in your comfort zone. It happens when you push against it. So ask yourself right now, which tool are you avoiding? That's probably the one you need most. If writing your North Star feels intimidating, you're probably unclear about your direction. If the duty contract feels rigid, maybe you lack standards. If the 5% rule feels slow, maybe you've been addicted to quick wins. Good. That's where you start. Remember, this is not about being extraordinary someday. It's about doing something extraordinary today. Even if no one sees it, even if it's small, even if it's hard. Because excellence isn't earned in public. It's built in private, and mediocrity, it dies in the presence of momentum. This is where the shift begins. Here's what nobody tells you. The enemy isn't failure. It's delay. It's waiting for permission. It's knowing deep down that you want more but choosing silence over struggle. You don't need to be rescued. You need to remember. Everything we've built in this journey, Nietzsche's fierce self-creation, Kant's unwavering moral structure, the raw psychology behind your habits, the 5 tools to reclaim direction, it all points to this moment. Right here, right now, this is where the drift ends. This is where your new standard begins. And no, it won't feel like a movie montage. There won't be music or applause. It'll be quiet, maybe even uncomfortable. Because the decision that changes everything rarely feels dramatic. It just feels honest. So be honest. What's one thing you've been postponing? One thing you know would move the needle, but you've convinced yourself it is not the right time. That's your start. Don't overthink it. Don't wait for motivation. Don't build a master plan. Just pick one to land, use it. Write your North Star. Sign your duty contract. Stack a habit, audit your inputs, or aim for 5% more this week. Any one of these, done today, beats a dozen some days, because every time you act with intention, you weaken the grip of mediocrity. And every time you show up not for show, not for likes, but for you, you take another step toward becoming someone even you will admire. You don't need to become extraordinary overnight. You just need to stop pretending you're okay with average. Don't just understand this, live it. So here's the final question. Are you going to close this tab and go back to scrolling? Or are you going to choose clarity over comfort? You've got the fire of Nietzsche, the structure of Kant, the tools, the truth, the mirror. Now it's your move. Drop a comment with the one tool you're going to start with. Not to impress anyone, but to declare it to yourself. If this video hits something real in you, stick around. We go deeper here, into the parts of you that want more. Into the philosophy, psychology, and strategy that don't just sound smart, but change the way you live. So subscribe, rewatch this when the fog returns, and share it with that one person who's forgetting their own power. Because we're not here to coast, we're here to rise. You're not behind, you're just beginning, and I'll see you in the next video.